What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to my impressions video of the various E3 conferences. Last time we talked about Microsoft, and this time it's going to be a bit shorter because there's not as much to talk about with Ubisoft, or Ubisoft. I never pronounce it correctly, but whatever. They're French. They don't care. So Ubisoft was not a conference I had very high expectations for, mostly because Ubisoft has this amazing habit of showing us stuff that's really good in concept and then habitually disappointing the heck out of us. Well, how did they do? Well, they started off with a dance number with people in suits, and there was a tiger and giraffe, and I think Freddie Mercury might have turned over in his grave a little bit because they played Queen's Don't Stop Me Now, and it was Just Dance because they got to get that out of the way. I'm glad they got that out of the way first, at least, though, but they still did it with a really weird presentation that I think nobody enjoyed. But after that, they moved on to Ghost Recon Wildlands, which in the context of the conference was actually extremely off-putting, and I won't really go into why, but if you watch the conference, you'd understand. It seemed very tactless that they started off with that in the nature that they presented the showing. Nonetheless, Ghost Recon Wildlands is literally exactly what you would expect from any Ubisoft game. It is open world, it is third-person shooter, it is dude bros talking and shooting bad guys, and it's open world, and there's radio towers, and it's open world, and there's guns, and it's open world. And it's Tom Clancy, and it's gritty. It's coming out March 17th, 2017. It's supposed to be just massive scope, much like Far Cry, which is also very open world and has lots of radio towers. So really, it's very generic. Granted, you know, there's a lot of people who love this Ubisoft formula. They love these kinds of games, and they're really into this kind of stuff. Me personally, I get bored with this stuff in a couple hours at best. So hopefully they end up making it surprising. Granted, it did look a lot less like the other Tom Clancy games and a little bit more like Metal Gear Solid 5 in its UI, which it almost seemed like a shameless ripoff at points, even with the atmosphere and the location and whatnot at times. But it's all cooperative. They use the stupid mic trick that Ubisoft tends to do, where they have these guys, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna go around, I'm gonna flank to the left, you cover me, and all this banter that nobody actually really does. I'm still waiting for them to insert the fifth guy in the background who goes, "Shut up, Mom! I'll take out the trash when I'm done. I can't save. This isn't Mario." You know, stuff like that. I mean, I'm waiting for that. When they insert that, I'll believe it more. Then they have this really gritty trailer showing what the future is going to be like. Another shooter, actually, they pulled a fast one on us. It was South Park: The Fractured Butthole, and I thought that was very clever. This was honestly one of the highlights of the conference. However, they did spend a little bit too much time on it. They, of course, did insert a lot of South Park jokes. This, again, looks very faithful to the source material, much like Stick of Truth did, rather than being a fantasy-based RPG that's kind of a joke play on Skyrim and Dragon Age. This is a much more of a superhero game and takes lots of shots at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Cinematic Universe and whatnot, but is in very much the same structure as the last game, except for its more real-time combat rather than RPG. And of course, it's very, very silly, very, very crude. It's South Park. It's South Park. If you're not into South Park, I mean, I can't recommend it too much, but if you're in any way into South Park or its humor, it's like the perfect game. So much great fan service, so faithful to the source material. And even me not being a South Park fan, just seeing something so faithful to the source material like that, I can't help but smile. And of course, they also had Matt Stone and Trey Parker there to talk about it. And, you know, those guys, you know, everyone adores and loves them. And, you know, they're closely involved with the projects. That's, again, how you know it's going to be pretty darn good. Then they talked about The Division Underground, which was, again, covered in the Xbox conference. They spent a lot of time talking about this, actually. They also talked about this survival DLC as well. Like, they teased it a little bit. They didn't show any release date for this, but it's apparently this survival mode. I mean, again, all they showed was a CGI trailer of it. They didn't really talk or give any details on it. So unfortunately, we don't know. They really just talked about the Underground expansion, which again was talked about at the Xbox conference prior. Then came some VR. Yeah, they had VR to talk about too, which I honestly didn't miss from the Bethesda conference. And I mean, even though it was very minimal in the Bethesda conference, I wasn't really too excited to see more. And if anyone did VR the worst, it was Ubisoft. They started with Eagle Flight, which, don't get me wrong, it's like these games look cool and interesting, and they look like something I could get behind. These VR games were all around Oculus Rift. They were not around the Vive like Bethesda was. They were around Oculus. And this was like, it's an actual flight game. It's like an air battle, but you're playing as eagles, and you're in France, and you fly around the Eiffel Tower, and you apparently shoot sonic waves at each other, and you got to score points. I didn't really get what was happening, but hey, it's there. And it's also going to be for PlayStation VR and Vive as well. That's right. The way that they showed it was specifically for Oculus. But it's a very VR centric game. It looks like it's competitive. I mean, it was okay. It did look really stupid seeing all those people up on stage just moving their heads around, not knowing where they're looking. I mean, I still think that kind of presentation is not very good. I feel like that was a struggle throughout most of E3 for almost all the conferences, was showing very janky cameras. And, I mean, I get it. Like, they're to control the camera, they actually have to have a real person's head, and then film the footage that way. But there's still a way to make it look believable and not make you also feel sick while watching it. And I don't think Ubisoft did that very well. Same thing happened with the next one, unfortunately, which was a big fan service, big spectacle, actually, because they even had some of the cast members from Star Trek itself on for Star Trek Bridge Crew. And my favorite was seeing Carl Urban, even though I think he had the least to say. But it's set in the J.J. Abrams universe of Star Trek, but you get to play, you get to be on the Enterprise, basically. It looks like it's going to be like an online cooperative thing where you do missions on the Enterprise. I mean, what Star Trek nerd wouldn't want that? That is a huge deal. I mean, I'll admit the presentation was pretty ugly. And again, like I said, they didn't handle the VR aspect of the presentation very well at all. But the concept itself is intriguing, and I'll give them that. I will give them that. I mean, not for me personally. My only Star Trek experience is of the J.J. Abrams films. I never was able to get into the actual TV show like most people have. But nor was I really ever exposed to it, so I can't really speak for that. But hey, it's there, and if it's good, I'll check it out. Then came my actual favorite part of the Ubisoft conference, starting with probably the one Ubisoft game I'm really anticipating, honestly, was For Honor, with my favorite Viking beard man, Jason Van der... I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, but he came out, much like last year, with his awesome epic voice and showed us For Honor. First, they did a CGI cutscene that really detailed the story. For Honor is kind of set in this fictional universe where knights, Vikings, and samurai, they have their own clans, and they are fighting in this 1,000-year war. And over time, they actually completely forgot what they were fighting about. But nevertheless, they're fighting. And it's really up to which of those three clans is going to, or I guess civilizations, is going to reign supreme. And the idea is that you are going to pick one of those sides, and you are going to battle through their storyline, I'm guessing. There's a whole multiplayer aspect to it, as well as a single-player aspect to it, which is great. The combat looks very engaging and very fluid. It's like Dark Souls, but with more depth and more weight. Although not near as difficult. It's got this like active battle stance system where you literally just by flicking the right stick can change the stance of your warrior when you're fighting, and there's this very in-depth combat and intuitive moves, and it really has me intrigued, and I'm extremely excited to see more. Granted, I'm always going to remain skeptical when a publisher name like Ubisoft is behind it, much like I would be with Activision or EA or Capcom or Warner Brothers. But that aside, if there's any game that's done nothing but impress me from Ubisoft over the last 2 years, it is For Honor. And this one is coming out February 14th, 2017. And then they moved on to the one indie darling, which unfortunately, although it wasn't UbiArt, was pretty much the next best thing they could have shown. And it was the sequel to Grow Home, which was a stealth hit from last year that kind of just snuck onto the store as a PlayStation Plus offering. and was a big hit. Everyone loved it. They really, really loved Grow Home. It's kind of just a side project from the developers, which I think is funny because it just kind of shows how bored the Ubisoft developers get with developing Assassin's Creed over and over again. So they brought out the sequel, which is called Grow Up. It's with the same character. They're cute robot named Bud who stars in it, and it looks adorable. I still need to play Grow Home before I can make any solid impressions on it, but it looks phenomenal, and I know it was well received, and I think that's exciting. And then probably the last of this awesome part of the Ubisoft conference, which honestly, in my opinion, didn't last long enough, was Trials of the Blood Dragon. They had this like wrestlers, like it almost felt like I was watching like a wrestling competition with the way these two guys were introduced, and it was the two developers, and they came in like meat suits. That's what it looked like they were wearing. And then guy comes on, and they're extremely cheesy, and they like, here's this thing, and he's like, Blood Dragon and Trials make baby. This is game. And it was awesome. And it's Trials of the Blood Dragon. It's got the 80s cheese that Far Cry Blood Dragon had, and they're making it into a Trials game. And Trials Fusion, if you haven't played it, is an exceptional game, and I highly recommend it. And I think it's really cool that they're adding this to it. I mean, why not? Why not? It's another Trials expansion, but hey, can't complain, because Trials Fusion is great. And that was about where the best part of the conference died, because then they went into Watch Dogs 2, and they not only went into Watch Dogs 2, they went into it full force, because apparently, even though Watch Dogs 1 was one of the worst disappointments of the last 20 years in terms of video games, like I'm not even exaggerating on that, with how much it was hyped up and how much it let everybody down. Not saying it was a terrible game, it was just so mediocre surrounding this amazing potential. But apparently that qualifies for next huge, massive Assassin's Creed-esque IP. Therefore, now we have Watch Dogs 2, and it's just as big of a deal. But oh wait, we're going to franchise this, and we're going to also make a movie out of it. Just you wait. You'll love it and stuff, even though the series hasn't proven itself whatsoever. Granted, Watch Dogs 2 looks better than Watch Dogs 1, okay? Not talking about the graphical quality, but just the gameplay features. There's like controlling drones. The character you're playing as has a lot more charisma to him. Like all the characters themselves in Watch Dogs 2 look more interesting than the character in Watch Dogs 1 could have ever hoped to possibly be. In fact, I think we got more personality out of the protagonist of Watch Dogs 2 in that trailer than we got out of Aiden Pierce in all of Watch Dogs 1. But the hacking looks better. It looks more interesting. There was one person on my Twitter feed who made the comment of, I wish they didn't have any guns in this game and it was all just about stealth and hacking. I think I agree with that. I think that would have made for a better experience if this guy hacked everything, but was, for the most part, pretty defenseless. Like, he could defend himself on a level of, like, the game Thief, where he had, like, a club or, like, like they gave him a knife, but he didn't really have anything beyond that. If it was just to that level, I think this could be an extremely interesting idea. Granted, this looks better, and I'm still skeptical. I mean, I'm very skeptical, obviously, but I'm going to wait for reviews before I make an ultimate judgment call. But it does look like they're making improvements, but at the same time, it still does look like typical par-for-the-course Ubisoft. And then, probably the low point of the entire conference, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people, some people will disagree on whether it was necessarily the low point, but it was pretty bad, was Steep, which is the brand new IP from Ubisoft. Because what do we got to do? We got to take another idea and slap the term open world on it, because that is what Ubisoft does. This time they're doing it to SSX, which is very strange because SSX already exists. Why can't we just do that? Oh, that's right. That's EA's property. Well, in that case, we're just going to make an open world snowboard ski game and make it Ubisoft, and it's always online and multiplayer, and it did not look good. It looked good. The graphics were great, but then again, hey, it can't be that hard to render so much snow because it's just a lot of white, I guess. I don't know. I couldn't really make out the particle effects too well on stream. But I mean, I don't know of anyone who was really excited or happy to see that, and they spent a long time on that, much like they did with Watch Dogs 2, much like they did with South Park, and honestly, much like they did with For Honor as well. Although, to For Honor's credit, at least it looked interesting. And South Park's as well. To their credit, they looked interesting. and like new and refreshing. Watch Dogs 2 and Steep, not so much, especially Steep. I mean, all in all, Ubisoft, first of all, their pacing was very bad. Very bad. They focused on some things way too little and other things way too much. Eagle Flight was another one they focused on way too much. I was like, holy crap, when is this going to end? I mean, I cut away for like 5-6 minutes and it was still there when I came back. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, I felt like it was going to be a quick minute or two demo, but no, they kept going. They had a full-on competition going. This is esports now, Eagle Sports. I mean, my goodness. The pacing was bad. I'm sorry. I don't like the way they present their conferences. It's annoying. It's very annoying. Way too much not shutting up. And really the only part I was actually invested in the conference was the For Honor to Trials of the Blood Dragon portion of the conference and grow up in the middle. Like those three, that part was the only part they really had me. I turned away from a lot of other stuff. When Division came on, turned away. Eagle Flight, I mean, all the VR stuff, didn't really care. Watch Dogs 2, I kind of half-heartedly watched. Steep, I watched about 3 minutes of it, and then I turned the stream off. Like, and Ghost Recon Wildlands, kind of the same thing. It was presented very poorly. And it also feels like Ubisoft isn't learning any of their lessons and from any of what their fans tell them, or what anyone tells them on how to make good games, because they just keep making the same mistakes. I'm hoping that with a game like For Honor, if it's what it looks like it's going to be, they figure that out and they make something cool. And if For Honor does well, they don't immediately milk 6 more iterations out of it and a movie and all that crap. Oh, and don't even get me started on, I don't even want to talk about this, but I have to because they shoehorned it in there, and this took too much time too. After Trials of the Blood Dragon, they went on to the Assassin's Creed movie. Yeah, we're talking about a movie at E3. What the heck was that about? And they said nothing about the movie that we didn't already know. They just showed a bit of the trailer, which we'd already seen. I personally still think the movie looks terrible because the action sequences look as bad as Avatar: The Last Airbender did. I'm talking about the M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, it looked bad. And they shoehorned that in the conference as well. Like, come on, Ubisoft. It had its high points, don't get me wrong. It wasn't a completely terrible conference. I've seen worse even from Ubisoft. I've definitely seen worse from EA. I've seen worse from other companies as well. Don't even get me started on companies like Konami, who had worse conferences. But it was I would say this was easily the worst showing of E3. It had its moments, but it just didn't have enough of them. And it was a long conference, too. I believe this one was another almost as long as Microsoft conference. I think it was almost 2 hours as well. So, yeah. Sorry, Ubisoft, but you're getting the lowest grade of the conference, even though, again, these grades are completely arbitrary. And that is a C. Well, after Ubisoft, we only had one more technical conference left, but I still have 2 more videos to make. This next one is going to cover Sony, and then the last one is going to be talking about really all the odds and ends of E3, including Nintendo and a little bit of the PC Gamer Show. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for this one, and I will see you all in the next one.